So at the moment we're 2-0 in this league. We're going into match 3 here. We are on the draw, and we're going to keep this hand. It's got a library, so we're going to make a bet here on this being one of the blue decks of the format. It's a pretty safe bet, given that's something like 60 to 70% of decks we're likely to encounter, with the remainder being dredge, storm to a lesser extent, survival and shops. We're pretty much going to auto lose 20 of those, and we may lose to a very fast paradoxical draw. But if we're playing one of the slower blue matchups, or if we get a couple of turns, library should pull us ahead fairly quickly. And we're playing a library standoff, and I think we're somewhat better equipped to win this, given we get to library first and start holding up interaction, even if we don't have much. So we're going to misstep him now, with I think the idea being that this turn we should library, play a land, and be willing to snap misstep. The reason to snap is basically library is a lot worse with a threat in play, but we've made a mistake here, and we played out a land before we'd activated library. So we're starting to get a little bit behind just due to misplays. I should probably point out I had been having some beers throughout this league, and of course as the league goes longer, the more beers you have, the worse you play. So we get to library again, and we're flooding out a little bit here, which is a bit of a problem. It's probably worth starting to fetch purely for thinning at this point. And we made a small error there, in that we didn't tap the Mox. So we should have tapped the Mox to be able to drop the Snapcaster in play. Our opponent playing out the Lotus here is probably a bit of an error on his end, as now he needs to have a way to deal with Snapcaster and be willing to burn it. Because basically if we cast the Snapcaster here and we resolve it, we are going to basically be able to library again next turn and take care of the DAC. So I think I mentioned in the first match of this league that on the DAC versus Snapcaster side here, you probably want to have the DAC the majority of the time. The card advantage from library is nice. The recurrable filtering of DAC, I think, just as the game goes longer, takes over. Being able to pick, which is the best of 3 cards every turn is just significantly better than, drawing blind every turn. Lets you find your interaction, lets you find your draw spells a lot quicker. So Time Walk, we're not too stressed about here. It's basically just an explore at this point. And snap Time Walk is not terribly concerning. Whereas whatever he's about to do here, so Lotus into Jace is probably GG. And I think Dig Through Time we can probably just concede 2 here. Yeah, so we'll just concede to Dig Through Time. So opponent's just seen too many cards. Our hand's pretty garbage. We probably could have kept playing for longer. We would have been bashed for 2 off the snap, but I feel like if he's got a full grip, he's probably going to do something pretty unpleasant next turn. It looks like he's probably on mental, so we're going to board for that. This is probably the most sure we've been in the entire league. Given we've played a slightly longer game, we've seen his full mana base develop, and there's not that many decks that are going to play the blue, white, red mana base. So we've cut a Jace, which may or may not be correct. Jace isn't amazing in the face of a Resolved Mental, so that's the main rationale behind the cut. We keep Tinker Blight still, as that's one of the only ways to beat a fast mental. We'll cut Vamp just because it's the top deck shooter. A single Preordain, as we have to shave something. We'll cut an Island, and we're bringing in our Sweeper. We're bringing in 2 Mindbreak Traps, and we're bringing in the second Notion Thief. I think I might like Jace over the second Notion Thief, but I can be swayed either way on that. So we'll get the play. We mulligan. I mulliganed a little bit quickly there, so I can't remember what was in the first hand. We're going to probably top the misstep. It's a bit of a hard decision. Okay, so we're just firing off the A-call, which is reasonable here. Normally we're incentivized to wait for his upkeep, but I think we're better off just firing it off now, and that way if we pull a Mox in this particular case, we weren't ever going to end up at a point where we needed to discard. So we're just going straight back to 7. Okay. So we'll play Voltaic Key, so we can drop Academy. This has a little bit of potential to backfire here, in that if he has something like a simple piece of artifact removal, we're going to lose our Academy here. But I think we might be happy enough to just Flusterstorm it if needs be. I don't know. I don't think we want to misstep just yet. Our opponent's already developing their mana pretty well, so we're better off holding it for something a little more relevant. I think our mana base is starting to shape up pretty well as well now. So we're happy to just sit and play draw go. We'd love to find, some draw spells like our opponent is, but that's not the end of the world. What we really want to do now, we've lucked out and ripped the Time Vault. So I think we'd really like to be able to mana drain something here. Or just draw a Lotus. So we're going to do this in our first main, so that we can fight over his choice of counterspell with a mana drain, which will give us mana in our second main to activate Voltaic Key if needs be. Now the important spell to have resolve here is going to be mana drain. Regardless of what our opponent does, because we're going to try to Yorg's Will into it next turn. I'm guessing because our opponent hasn't already conceded, he has one more piece of interaction here. I think we're actually okay. Alright, so snap, misstep. we're going to lose the mana. We're going to be okay with this, as while we don't have the mana drain mana for Will, I accidentally just skipped through a turn there. Our opponent just attacked and did nothing. Attacked and cast a Mox Ruby. Okay, so we want to draw a blue spell here. Or a Mox might just do it. So our opponent's very likely to tap out for a Force of Will. And so I think Ancestral into Time Vault here. Gives us, it's not a guarantee that we're going to win, but it gives us a reasonable chance. All we're aiming to do at the moment is basically just make it to the next turn. We just need to fade a turn, so we just need to dodge any piece of artifact removal. The moment we do that, we're not out of the woods, because we're going to go to 12 and possibly lose some life off Mana Crypt. We might have to play through for a few turns. But once again, our opponent concedes, and we don't know why, because there is yet another bug in Magic Online replays. Isn't that grand? So third game of match 3. We're on the draw. Clearly we're 1-1. We're playing against what we assume is Mental. We haven't actually seen a Mental yet, but it's the only deck I can think of that plays blue, white, red colours. This hand's a little potentially flaky. We don't have a lot of interaction. We have a sweeper. We have a cantrip. We have a land. Jace is a bit clunky at this point. Cool. And we have cut the second Notion Thief for the second to bring in the second Jace back in, which I'm glad of. We're going to misstep. No, okay, so we decided not to misstep. I think there was a reasonable misstep there, but I guess we were trying to protect the Ponder. And I think we definitely want to take top and Fluster here. So it doesn't really matter which one we draw. Okay, and our opponent's on Library. Once again, I think we're happy with top in the face of Library. Once again, just because of the rather good filtering it provides. So we're going to be able to, have a fair few choices of what we actually want to draw for turn. So we'll misstep now. Just so that he has the Library in his turn. And can we cruise yet? So if we draw... Okay, so I don't think we can cruise just yet. We're going to take the Academy. We're probably just going to go after whatever he does next. We definitely want that Sapphire. So what we're going to try and do So I think now we can actually just try to stick a Notion Thief in front of his next draw spell with Flusterstorm back up. Okay, and that's the perfect counterspell for us to see, because that has forced him to tap out. So he didn't have a Reb, he didn't have a sword, he's had to Mindbreak Trap. So what this means is if he wants to counter Notion Thief, he now needs to Force of Will, which is probably worth him doing, because he'll get to draw up sooner rather than later into Library. But it buys us a few turns. But instead he's got nothing. We get to redraw our top, and we're actually going to get to cruise now as well. So we've got nothing we're particularly worried about preserving in the graveyard. It's nice to have a top, and it's nice to be able to like snap Fluster or snap Misstep. But I think we're relatively happy to delve all of this away. Especially because we've now found an Emerald and a Flusterstorm, so we're going to be able to hold up a Braid and have a DAC for next turn. So we can let him have Dig. He's still a long way from getting back onto Library. And Stony Silence. So look, so far so good. Stony Silence is a bit of a non-card at this point, believe it or not. Mentor makes it a bit of a tougher proposition. Okay. So we've top decked into exactly, we've ancestraled into exactly what we need. So we needed to ancestral there we already have the sweeper. Basically we need to be able to win a fight when we go to counter it. And so that's exactly what we've aimed to do here. So what we're going to do next is we're probably going to, even better, I think a Braid the Mentor. It's possible we should have cast DAC first. So if we DAC, then we can make him discard 2 cards. Looks like he doesn't have a heap going on because he's just going to wear one of our artifacts. So yeah, if we DAC'd, we made him discard 2 cards, he probably would have discarded Wear or maybe cast it, in which case it's better for us again anyway. And what we're going to do is the monk can attack us. He can bash into DAC, and that's okay. With only 1 spell drawn for turn. The worst he can chip into DAC for is 2. Then we can Jace bounce the monk next turn. And I think Force plus Will probably seal this up. Okay, so we're going to let the Stony Silence resolve. Once again, it's just a non-card here. our opponent's been playing pretty slow, so he's burning his clock pretty hard. Monk's chipped Dak down to 2. And alright, so we've cast Yawgmoth's Will. I think we now have basically all the time in the world. We can abrade the monk. And our opponent has conceded.